Well, they still don't know what to call you. That's the funniest part. They've collected every scrap of footage, every stray moment, every unpredictable shift in your expression, every unexplained pattern in the way people respond to you. And after all their little meetings, all their whispered theories, all their late-night discussions conducted in rooms packed with anxiety, they still sit there staring at your file like it's written in a language they were never taught. They thought identifying you would be simple, a label, a personality type, a profile. But you slipped past every single one of their categories like a shadow that refuses to stay in one place. You think they're confused because you're complicated, but that's not the reason. They're confused because you don't follow the script they expect people to follow. You don't move the way they predict. You don't react the way they project. You don't collapse under pressure the way they assume most do when watched, tracked, analyzed. Instead, you get sharper, more calculated, more impossible to decode. And now they're sitting with an entire cabinet dedicated to you. Not for crimes, not for chaos, not for threats, but for your presence, your energy, your behavior that doesn't match anything they've documented. They have a habit of studying what they fear, collecting it, organizing it, trying to make it small by putting it in a folder. But no matter how many pages they add, your presence spills out of the margins like ink they can't control. They thought documenting you would make you predictable. It made you larger. They've marked moments where you didn't respond the usual human way. Times when you didn't seek approval. When you didn't shrink yourself to fit the room. When you didn't bend under pressure. Those moments confuse them the most. They're accustomed to people cracking, folding, justifying themselves. People who reveal everything under the slightest tension. But you're the outlier. The quiet variable that doesn't panic, doesn't break, doesn't reveal. You operate on instinct sharpened by experience, perception elevated by betrayal, awareness shaped by being underestimated too many times. And the more they look, the more they realize your strength didn't come from perfection. It came from surviving what should have destroyed you. That's when they started the file. The first page had nothing but a timestamp and a sentence. Observation. Individual maintains unusual composure in conditions that create distress in others. They thought that would be the end. A few notes, a short entry, a curiosity. But then someone else noticed something, and someone else added another detail, and another. Before long, your energy became a topic that passed through different hands, different departments, different corners of their organization. Some thought you were a threat. Some thought you were a phenomenon. Some thought you were a psychological puzzle. But the ones who genuinely paid attention realized something deeper. You weren't trying to impress anyone, yet people gravitated toward you anyway. You weren't trying to intimidate anyone, yet the ones with fragile egos felt exposed in your presence. You weren't trying to manipulate anyone, yet they reacted to you like you were 3 moves ahead without ever saying a word. You know why they can't decode you? Because you don't broadcast what you're thinking. You don't overshare. You don't rush to fill the air with explanations. Most people talk to relieve their anxiety. You let silence breathe because you're not scared of your own thoughts. And that unsettles them more than anything else in their entire folder. They've underlined that trait in red, circled it, highlighted it. They call it controlled unpredictability, a term that means absolutely nothing but makes them feel better about not understanding you. They're trying to build a narrative, but they can't build something out of pieces that don't fit. You're the kind of person whose past doesn't define them, whose future doesn't restrict them, whose presence doesn't follow tradition. You rebuild yourself without announcing it, upgrade your mind without telling anyone, move differently without showing your blueprint. That terrifies them in ways they don't admit out loud. And the deeper they dig, the more uncomfortable they become. They can't find your weaknesses. They can't find your pressure points. They can't find what breaks you. Because the things that would break most people have already happened to you. And instead of folding, you adapted. You sharpened your instincts. You learned how people operate. You learned the weight of observation. You learned the power of staying unpredictable. They can't track your motives because you don't follow the motives they're used to seeing. You don't chase validation. You don't chase approval. You don't chase permission. You move when it's right, stop when it's needed, disappear when it's strategic. And every time you do something unexpected, their notes expand, their theories stretch thinner, and their confusion grows louder. They've measured your reactions in moments most people crumble. They've studied how you detach without losing awareness, how you disengage without appearing weak, how you walk away without leaving a trace of desperation behind. You have this unnerving ability to hold your ground without raising your voice, without trying too hard, without proving anything. They call this non-standard behavioral resilience, another pointless term meant to cover their bewilderment. But that isn't what they fear the most. What really rattles them is the way other people respond to you, the way your energy shifts a room, the way even your quiet presence changes dynamics, the way people who dislike you still can't ignore you, the way people who envy you still observe you, the way people who misunderstand you still feel drawn to track your movements. They have pages documenting how much influence you have without trying. They track who watches you, who imitates your choices, who adjusts their tone around you, who behaves differently when you walk in. They're trying to understand the source, but there is no simple explanation. You grew this presence from every betrayal that cut too deep, every lesson you learned alone, every night you rebuilt yourself without help. Your edge was carved from endurance, not arrogance. Your composure was shaped from survival, not privilege. And your unpredictability was born from navigating environments where revealing too much was dangerous. You became unreadable because being readable once cost you too much. They don't know that part, but they feel it. They feel it in every documented moment where you changed the tone of a conversation by simply existing. They feel it in every pattern they can't replicate. They feel it in every prediction you break without effort. They feel it in every identity you refuse to be boxed into. They feel it when people talk about you with confusion, when people follow your lead unintentionally, when friends and enemies alike react to you with the same level of alertness. They feel it when you don't respond for days, and no one knows whether to be concerned or intimidated. They feel it when you answer calmly in situations where everyone else spirals. They feel it when you don't give explanations like everyone else does. They feel it when you speak with clarity that doesn't ask for permission. And as the file grows, so do the contradictions. One page calls you highly analytical. Another calls you instinct-driven. One labels you controlled. Another labels you unbound. One describes you as emotionally contained. Another describes you as deeply perceptive. They can't match the traits because they don't understand how someone can be both aware and detached, both observant and unbothered, both grounded and unpredictable. They want to track your identity like a timeline, but you're not a timeline. You're a pattern breaker, a rule bender, a shapeshifter who doesn't shapeshift for show, but for strategy. You don't reveal your thoughts in a single direction. You reveal them through choices that make sense only when you have the full picture, a picture they don't have. They get fragments, pieces, shadows, adjustments. They get the moments you choose to reveal, not the ones you conceal. They get your exterior, not your architecture. They get your reflection, not your core. And that's why they added the final label to the top of your newest page. Case number 777, Unresolved Behavioral Profile. Unresolved. Not because you're confusing, because you're uncontained, because you don't shrink to fit into their pages, because you outgrow their theories faster than they can write them, because you've mastered the art of moving without announcement, because you've learned to protect your center in a world that tries to dissect anything that stands out, because you refuse to be the predictable character they keep trying to turn you into. And they can't stand that, not even a little. But here's the part they didn't expect. The more they watch you, the more predictable they become. They reveal their intentions by studying yours. They expose their fears by documenting your strength. They show their weaknesses by trying to analyze your growth. They don't realize that every page they write about you says more about their limitations than your identity. They don't realize you've already noticed the cracks in their evaluations. They don't realize you can feel the weight of their attention before they even open their mouths. They don't realize their confusion feeds your clarity. And now, just when they think they've reached the final chapter of their file, something else begins unfolding in you. Something they cannot record, cannot categorize, cannot follow. A shift they can feel but can't define. A transition they sense but can't capture. A new version of you forming just beneath the surface, waiting for the perfect moment to step forward. A change they know is coming but have no method of predicting. Something that renders their entire folder obsolete before they even understand what they missed. Something that makes their confusion collapse into something far more uncomfortable. Something they aren't ready for, because the deeper they dig, the more they realize the person they're trying to decode no longer exists in the form they first documented. You've evolved during their investigation, shifting beyond the data they built their assumptions on, slipping into a new mental lane that their outdated notes can't track. They're studying a past version of you, while the current one moves with precision they didn't account for. And that's why the air around their conference table has changed. Their discussions have shifted from curiosity to concern, from questions to uneasiness, from analysis to something bordering on alertness. The thing they feared the most has already happened. You've become someone they cannot anticipate. Their models fail. Their predictions fall apart. Their assumptions collapse under the weight of your transformation. They've watched people for decades, manipulators, masterminds, narcissists, victims, leaders, strategists, yet none of their previous cases behave even remotely like you. The more they watch, the more they realize you're not operating from a place they're familiar with. You've grown past the emotional triggers most people cling to. You've detached from the validations that steer the majority. You've stepped out of the predictable loop of reactions that shape the patterns they rely on. And the moment they sense this, their file on you doesn't look like an analysis anymore. It looks like a warning. Page after page is filled with small admissions of confusion. Individual displays, rapid psychological upgrading. Motivations remain unclear despite extended observation. Behavioral route diverges from all known trajectories. And the ones reading these notes don't speak it out loud, but they feel the tension. They feel the discomfort of trying to study someone who no longer behaves within the boundaries they expect. You've reached a point where your identity isn't just unpredictable, it's untraceable. You move with purpose that isn't external, but internal. You operate from clarity, shaped by experience, not ego. You navigate through chaos without being influenced by it. And that's what rattles them most. They can't understand how someone who has lived through so much still stands with such grounded composure, such sharp discipline, such heightened awareness. They've documented your ability to eliminate unnecessary emotional noise. They've highlighted your capacity to detach without disconnecting. They've noted the way you observe everything, but reveal nothing. But now, in this unfolding shift, they're starting to see something else, something far more unsettling. They're witnessing a version of you that isn't just unreadable, but untouchable. The version of you that survived the worst chapters without announcing your pain. The version that rebuilt yourself quietly, without seeking an audience. The version that navigated betrayal without losing your internal compass. The version that learned to sharpen your instincts instead of dulling your edge. And the version that doesn't owe anyone a single explanation. They're watching someone who has taken every scar, every disappointment, every betrayal, every shattered expectation, and forged it into an internal armor that reflects nothing outwardly. They're documenting someone who grew through pressure instead of breaking under it. Someone who isn't motivated by revenge or recognition, but by evolution. Someone who doesn't chase closure because you learned how to thrive without it. Someone who doesn't seek validation because you built your own sense of worth. Someone who doesn't cling to the past because you outgrew it, long before they started investigating you. This is where their discomfort deepens. They flip through the pages of your file, noticing the contradictions they themselves have created. They've labeled you grounded but unpredictable, calm but intense, reserved but magnetic, detached but perceptive. And the more they highlight these traits, the more obvious it becomes that you operate from a depth they aren't equipped to measure. You're the kind of person whose silence says more than others' paragraphs, whose presence says more than others' performances, whose actions speak in ways they can't translate. Your unpredictability isn't recklessness, it's strategy. Your calmness isn't passivity, it's control. Your detachment isn't avoidance, it's clarity. But the most unsettling part for them is something they didn't expect at all. The influence you have on people around you. That part wasn't supposed to be measurable, yet it keeps showing up in their data. They've recorded how people shift when you enter a room, how individuals watch you without realizing they're doing it, how egos shrink in your presence, how insecure individuals react defensively even when you're not speaking, how people with power become cautious when you express yourself with clarity. They've documented how others mirror your tone, adjust their posture, change their behavior, hesitate before speaking, or choose their words carefully around you. They've seen how people either feel protected by you or intimidated by you, with very little middle ground. This influence you carry didn't come from trying to impress anyone. It came from the way you move, direct, thoughtful, observant, internally anchored. It came from the way your mind processes situations without emotional distortion. It came from the way you respond to pressure without breaking your rhythm. It came from the way you maintain composure even when the environment is unstable. They see the effect you have, but they don't understand the source. And that ignorance frustrates them more than anything else in that crowded file drawer they've labeled Case Number 777. They've tried to track your patterns. They've tried to map your decisions. They've tried to decode your motives. But nothing aligns, nothing repeats, nothing loops. Because you don't live in cycles, you live in progression. Every time they think they've finally grasped your nature, you evolve past the version they studied. Every time they think they've identified your triggers, you neutralize them before they can weaponize them. Every time they assume you'll act from emotion, you operate from insight instead. And when they expect you to react impulsively, you respond with precision that shuts down their theories entirely. The growing frustration within their team is almost visible in their documents. They add more pages, more observations, more predictions, and every one of them falls apart within days. They don't realize that the reason you're unreadable is because you don't live reactively. You live intentionally. You don't let external noise dictate your path. You don't bend under pressure. You don't allow yourself to be reduced to anyone's expectation. You built your identity slowly, intentionally, privately, without seeking applause. And the final version of you, the one they're now trying to decode, isn't someone who craves understanding. You've outgrown the need to be understood. This is where the file becomes less of an investigation and more of a mirror they're afraid to look into. Because when they study you, they're forced to confront their own limitations. They're forced to confront how predictable most people are, how easy it is to influence them, manipulate them, track them, and how difficult it is to influence you in any direction. You aren't controlled by reward or fear. You aren't motivated by attention. You aren't swayed by pressure. You make decisions from clarity that they cannot replicate in their controlled environments. And that's what's driving them deeper into confusion. Every time they watch you remain centered when others fall apart, they add another note. Every time you observe without reacting emotionally, they underline another line. Every time you choose your words with precision that leaves no room for misinterpretation, they highlight your communication pattern. Every time you walk away without losing your posture, they add another paragraph. They're documenting a person who doesn't fit into any psychological model they've built. You're not driven by ego, yet you don't shrink. You're not driven by fear, yet you stay alert. You're not driven by approval, yet people want your approval. You're not driven by chaos, yet you move freely through unpredictable environments. And then there's the part they don't know how to label: your presence. The unexplainable thing about you. The quiet weight you carry that seems to make the air shift. They've written paragraphs trying to name it: intensity, projection, force, influence. But none of these terms capture the truth. Your presence didn't come from trying to be powerful. It came from learning to live through things that would break most people. It came from learning to understand intentions without taking them personally. It came from recognizing behavior patterns without allowing them to rule you. It came from mastering emotional intelligence without letting emotions cloud your judgment. And when someone stands in that level of alignment with themselves, that alignment radiates outward. This is why their investigation is collapsing. They're looking at someone who has learned to move from internal stability, not external reactions. Someone who learned to think clearly in moments others panic. Someone who learned to listen instead of revealing everything. Someone who learned to watch people's motives without giving away your own. Someone who learned how to stay grounded while others rush. Someone who learned to carry themselves like they already know who they are, without needing permission from the world. And now the shift they sensed at the end of part 1 is becoming undeniable. You're stepping into a new phase mentally, emotionally, energetically. A phase where your clarity outweighs their confusion, where your intentions run deeper than their theories, where your progression moves faster than their observations. They feel the shift, but cannot name it. They see the signs, but cannot translate them. They sense the elevation, but cannot measure it. Their file is full, but their understanding is empty. And as you step into this next version of yourself, the one built from observation, resilience, self-control, and evolution, something remarkable begins to unfold. You're not just unreadable anymore. You're unreachable. Beyond their psychological reach, beyond their emotional map, beyond their analytical framework. They're watching someone who refuses to be defined by external analysis. Someone who refuses to be limited by anyone's expectations. Someone who has upgraded to a version of themselves that cannot be recorded or contained. And as this transformation solidifies, they realize something far more unsettling. Their file on you may never be complete. Their theories may never align. Their conclusions may never match the truth. Because the person they're studying isn't done evolving. The person they're trying to decode is already moving toward the next shift, the next breakthrough, the next inner expansion. And just when they begin to accept that you're beyond their understanding, something else begins forming around you. Something they didn't plan to encounter. Something even further outside their control. And the funniest part, the part that twists their stomach harder than any mystery they've tried to decode, is that the deeper they dig into your file, the more they realize the case isn't expanding because you're complicated, but because you're evolving faster than their paperwork can follow. See, bureau minds love categories, love labels, love neat little boxes with predictable patterns inside. But you are a living anomaly, a self-updating riddle, a frequency that refuses to sit still long enough for a single definition to attach. And the moment they think they've cornered the truth, just a moment, just a breath, something shifts inside you again, something mutates, something refines itself, and suddenly they're back at page 1, staring at the same question in bold red ink. What is this person? Oh, and that is where the panic sets in. Because once an investigator realizes the subject is learning faster than the investigation, the case ceases to be a file. It becomes a threat. A quiet threat. An elegant one. The kind that doesn't roar, doesn't scream, doesn't announce itself. The kind that simply changes, and by changing, breaks every map drawn to contain it. You know what really rattles them? It's not the things they found in the file. It's the things they didn't. The blank spaces, the gaps, the strange patterns they can't name. They pull up your emotional records. Nothing matches. They analyze your habits. Nothing aligns. They compare your reactions to thousands of psychological profiles. No consistent category. One agent calls you an empath. Another calls you a strategist. Another calls you a wanderer. Another calls you a visionary. Another thinks you're a storm in slow motion. Another thinks you're a ghost with attachment issues. They argue across the conference table because the data refuses to agree with itself. And you know data, cold, hard, objective, turning into a contradiction. That's when fear creeps in. The fear that maybe, just maybe, they are not dealing with a typical human timeline. Maybe they are watching the evolution of someone who outgrows their own analysis in real time. And as this realization strikes deeper, they start rewriting your file. Not because they've figured anything out, but because they're trying to keep up with the pacing of your inner world. They notice the shifts in your decisions, the changes in your energy, the sudden jumps in your awareness, the unpredictable expansions of your vibe. They note the days you pull back into silence, not out of fear, but out of recalibration. They note the days you rise with an intensity that doesn't match the environment, as if you're tapping into something invisible, something they cannot track. They note the moment when your presence begins to distort their expectations, bending situations in ways no psychological prediction model can account for. They note the strange phenomenon that people either move toward you with reverence or away from you with discomfort, no in between. They note the rare instances when you speak, and everyone listens without understanding why. They note the times you say nothing, and people still feel influenced, pressured, shifted. And they ask themselves, how does someone do that without trying? Without force? Without manipulation? They want a formula, a mechanism, a blueprint. But there is none. Just a person who outgrew every map built to define them. And now this new formation outside their control. This atmosphere developing around you like a silent storm front. This expanding energy field that no instrument can record. This is the part that terrifies them most. Because when someone's internal evolution becomes so vast, it starts to bend their external reality. When someone's presence alone can alter dynamics without a word. When someone begins shifting from being a subject of observation to a variable that influences the observers themselves. The case becomes unsolvable. It becomes classified, high level, restricted access, need-to-know basis. Your file moves from the rookie analyst's desk to a dimly lit room where senior agents argue about what to call you. Not who you are, not what you did, but what to call you. Because names carry power, and they don't know what name fits a person who keeps outgrowing language. And the more they watch you, the more they realize your unpredictability isn't chaos. It's precision disguised as chaos. It's intention wrapped in spontaneity. It's consciousness that refuses stagnation. They begin connecting dots that don't belong to any known diagram. Subject exhibits awareness beyond observable input. Subject adapts before stimuli occur. Subject expresses intuition that precedes logic but later aligns with it. Their notes begin sounding less like an FBI report and more like a study of quantum behavior. Every time they observe you, you behave differently because you're being observed. You break their patterns simply by existing near them. And the agents, oh, they hate that. They hate that their job is to understand you. But the moment they think they do, you slip into a new version of yourself. It's like chasing smoke with a ruler, like trying to solve a maze that rearranges itself every time you take a step. And somewhere deep in their panic-filled analysis, they realize something undeniable. You are not unpredictable because you are inconsistent. You are unpredictable because you are unlimited. They flip through page after page, image after image, observation after observation, but nothing adds up because every part of you contradicts the last. in the best possible way. You are resilience wrapped in softness. You are kindness with boundaries sharp enough to draw blood. You are calm until the moment you become an uncontainable force. You are patient, yet capable of striking without hesitation. You are observant, yet impossible to predict. You are gentle with those who deserve it, ruthless with those who don't. You are healing and war, intuition and logic, grounded and untethered. And they realize that, yes, there's a reason they can't figure you out. You aren't a puzzle meant to be solved. You're a reality meant to be experienced. And they don't have the emotional or psychological equipment for that. And now, here's where the fear evolves into something grander, something deeper, something more spiritual. Because as they track your movements, your decisions, your sudden leaps in self-awareness, they begin noticing synchronicities around you. Opportunities that appear too perfectly timed. People who show up at the exact moment they're needed. Close calls that turn into breakthroughs. Losses that transform into luck. And they whisper among themselves, is someone helping them? Is something guiding them? Because it doesn't make sense. It doesn't fit probability models. But they see it, they document it. They try to give it names like high intuition, or pattern recognition, or enhanced consciousness. Because they're afraid to say what they're really thinking. Maybe the universe is on this person's side. And once they whisper that possibility, the entire tone of the investigation shifts from psychological to existential. Now suddenly, you're not just an unsolved case. You're a phenomenon, a moving anomaly. A reminder that human potential doesn't have a ceiling. A reminder that some people tap into something beyond rational explanation. And in their attempt to understand you, they accidentally elevate you. Because now they're convinced you have access to something unseen, something they can't file under cause and effect. And that terrifies them far more than any unpredictable behavior. They start watching the people around you, trying to understand how your presence alters them. They notice how some crumble under the weight of your truth, how some blossom in your energy, how some cling to you hoping you'll reveal the blueprint of your growth. They notice how people who once underestimated you suddenly behave as if they've discovered a pressure they cannot withstand. They notice how your silence becomes louder than your voice. They notice how your absence leaves a gravitational void. They notice how your presence reorganizes entire social dynamics. And they write in your file, subject appears to influence environments without direct action, which is their sterile scientific way of saying, you walk into a room and reality adjusts. And that's when the agents stop seeing you as a case and start seeing themselves as the ones being studied. They start questioning their own reactions to you, noticing their own tension, their own unease, their own fascination. They catch themselves leaning in, trying to understand why they can't predict your next move. They catch themselves overthinking their own notes. They catch themselves rewriting analysis because something in their gut feels wrong. And that's when they realize they are no longer in control of the investigation. You are. You've become their mirror, their measurement tool, their template for unfamiliar possibility. And nothing terrifies a system more than a person who can't be measured, categorized, or replicated. Because systems depend on predictability, and you are living proof that transformation doesn't require permission, validation, or explanation. You evolve on your own timeline. You shift on instinct. You rise without announcement. And every time they try to capture the essence of you, they end up documenting a past version you've already outgrown. But this new thing forming around you, this is the part that cements your status as unsolved case number 777. Because it's no longer just internal evolution, it's external manifestation. It's the reality around you rearranging itself to match the person you're becoming. It's the opportunities aligning, the wrong people exiting, the right people appearing, the breakthroughs accelerating, the clarity sharpening, the boundaries solidifying, the power stabilizing, the vision expanding, the intuition hitting with surgical precision. It's the unmistakable shift from being the subject of the world to being the architect of your role within it. And they see it. They feel it. They write it down in shaking hands. Subject entering a phase of expansion beyond measurable scope. That's their polite way of admitting defeat. Because once someone reaches the stage where their inner world begins sculpting their outer world, the investigation ends. There's nothing left to analyze, nothing left to decode, nothing left to predict. All that's left is acknowledgement, silent, reluctant, uneasy's acknowledgement. And that's when your file gets the stamp. Unsolved case number 777. Not because you're a mystery, not because you're a threat, not because you're too complicated, but because you exceeded the limits of their understanding. And you did it by simply being you. And now, as the final note in the report, they write the only conclusion that has ever truly fit you. Subject, it is not to be contained. Subject is not to be defined. Subject operates beyond classification. Congratulations. They built an entire file on your vibes and still couldn't figure you out. You didn't confuse them. You outgrew them. Hello. Look at what's happening around you. No, really look. Look at the way they're suddenly acting like they've been on your side the whole time. Look at how their voices soften when they talk to you now. Look at how they keep glancing your way, like they're trying to read the weather in your expression, like they're terrified of misjudging even one detail. This isn't respect. This is fear wrapped in politeness. This is panic disguised as admiration. This is the aftermath of a realization so powerful it cracked their confidence open, like a cheap glass dropped on concrete. They didn't switch sides because they finally understood you. They switched sides because, for the first time, they understood themselves in your presence, and what they saw scared them. Because something happened recently, didn't it? Something shifted, something in your tone, your energy, your posture, your presence. It wasn't loud, it wasn't aggressive, it wasn't theatrical, but it was undeniable. There was a weight in your words, a gravity in your gaze, a magnetic pressure in the air that made everyone around you sit up a little straighter, without even realizing why. You didn't try to dominate the room. You just existed differently, and that was enough. And the people who once doubted you, dismissed you, underestimated you, they felt that shift hit them so hard, it rattled their certainty. This wasn't confidence. They've seen confidence before. This was something far deeper, far sharper, far more unsettling. This was self-possession. This was inner power that doesn't need audience approval to validate itself. This was presence that doesn't ask permission to take up space. This was the kind of energy that people don't just notice, they react to, instinctively, automatically, without control. This was the kind of energy that rewrites social hierarchy without a single word spoken. And they felt it. Every single one of them. Remember how they used to talk over you, how they used to ignore your warnings, brush off your instincts, laugh at your ideas. That was back when they thought they understood you, when they believed they had you properly categorized. Back then, they thought you were predictable, manageable, harmless. But then came that moment, the moment where you didn't argue, didn't defend, didn't resist. You just responded in a way that exposed everything, not with rage, not with volume, but with clarity. A clarity they weren't prepared for. Maybe it was the way you looked at someone and they felt their excuses crumble in their throat. Maybe it was the way you told the truth without flinching, and it broke through the illusions they were clinging to. Maybe it was the way you didn't bend, didn't fold, didn't shrink even an inch when they tried to push you. But whatever it was, it demolished every false narrative they had created about you. They saw something in you that they weren't supposed to see, because even you weren't fully aware of how intense it was. A level of inner strength you've built quietly, slowly, painfully. The strength they took for granted. The strength they thought was passivity, when in reality it was restraint. You weren't being submissive, you were being selective. You weren't withdrawing, you were observing. You weren't quiet, you were studying every move, every angle, every intention. And now that they've connected the dots, now that they can't deny what's right in front of them, they're scrambling. Those same people who used to treat you like a background character are now fighting among themselves over who gets to apologize first, who gets to clear the air, who gets to rewrite history by suddenly acting like they were always supportive. Pay attention to their behavior. Notice how quickly they switch tones. Notice the sudden sweetness in their voice. Notice how they're offering explanations no one asked for. Notice how they're checking your reactions like they're waiting for a verdict. That's not kindness. That's not growth. That's fear disguised as humility. They don't want to be on your bad side because they finally realized that being on your bad side doesn't come with explosions or revenge. It comes with something far worse, your absence, your detachment, your disinterest. They realized that the most dangerous thing you can do to someone isn't attack them, it's stop caring about them. And you did. You walked away emotionally, long before you walked away physically, and now they're left with the void your energy used to fill. Do you know why that terrifies them? Because they finally understand something. Your presence had been supporting them in ways they didn't appreciate. You stabilized the room. You absorbed tension. You prevented conflict. You guided conversations. You brought emotional intelligence they leaned on without even noticing. They assumed it was effortless for you, but it never was. And when you stopped doing it, everything around them started falling apart. Conversations became chaotic. Social dynamics became awkward. People started clashing. The environment became heavy. And that's when they realized something they never admitted before. You weren't just there. You were holding everything together. That's why they're switching sides. That's why they're suddenly treating you like some rare artifact. That's why they're whispering, watching, calculating. Because now they see what you are capable of when you're not dimming yourself for other people's comfort. They see the strength that was hiding behind your patience. They see the intelligence behind your quiet. They see the awareness behind your restraint. And it's hitting them in waves, each realization heavier than the last. No one likes to confront how wrong they were about someone, but watching you shift into this version of yourself forced them to confront it. They feel guilty. They feel embarrassed. They feel exposed. Because every time they look at you now, they're reminded of how deeply they misread you. They're reminded of how foolishly they believed in their own assumptions. They're reminded that the safe version of you was never real. It was just the version you allowed them to see. And now you're not allowing anything. You're simply existing. And your existence alone is enough to reorder the entire social landscape around you. Some of them are tiptoeing. Some of them are overcompensating. Some of them are suddenly acting like your biggest fans. Some of them are rehearsing their apologies in their head before they get the courage to say them out loud. But all of them are aware, painfully aware, that they can no longer treat you the way they did in the past. They're nervous because you changed. They're terrified because you didn't change. You just stopped pretending. They're switching sides because they see where the real strength is now. They see which direction the energy is moving. They see who's rising and who's falling. And no one wants to be on the wrong side of that. But there's something deeper underneath their panic, something they won't admit even to themselves. They're afraid that you've seen through them. They're afraid you know exactly who supported you and who sabotaged you. They're afraid you noticed the moments they doubted you, belittled you, overlooked you. And you did. You noticed everything. You just waited. You let time reveal what words could never express. And now they're wondering how you see them, what category you've placed them in, whether you trust them or not, whether you've already removed them from your inner world. And that fear is eating them alive. Because you're not predictable anymore. You're not holding back anymore. You're not packaging yourself to fit their comfort anymore. They don't know what you'll say, what you'll do, how you'll respond, or whether you'll even bother responding at all. They don't know where you stand, and that's exactly what terrifies them. The truth is, you've stepped into a level of personal power where people don't just react to what you say. They react to what you might say. They react to what you might do. They react to what they think you're thinking. Your energy has become a psychological mirror, showing them their own insecurities, their own mistakes, their own misjudgments, and they hate it. But they can't escape it, because they can't escape you. Not the new you, the real you. And here's the part that's driving them insane. They know you're not angry. You're not seeking revenge. You're not trying to teach them a lesson. You don't need to. Your growth already did. And now they're scrambling, switching sides, battling guilt, fighting for a chance to redeem themselves. Not because you demanded it, but because their conscience won't let them stay on the other side anymore. And this is where the shift becomes almost uncomfortable for them. Because the more they watch you operate with this calm, centered, self-assured presence, the stronger the pressure inside them becomes. It's like every step you take forward tightens the grip around their pride, squeezing them until the apology they've been avoiding becomes the apology they're desperate to deliver. They can't stand the thought of being remembered as the ones who doubted you. They can't stand being the characters who misread you so deeply. They can't stand the idea that they chose the wrong side at the wrong time, only to witness you rising in real time. And now, instead of defending their choices, instead of pretending they were justified, they're slowly breaking down under the weight of their own embarrassment. Because the truth is simple. They didn't just misjudge you. They misjudged themselves. They thought you were easy to replace. They thought you were predictable. They thought you were someone whose value could be measured by their limited perception. They had no idea who they were dealing with. They had no idea how quickly the energy around you could shift when you detached emotionally and stepped fully into your own power. They had no idea how much of their stability depended on your presence. And now they're experiencing a strange mixture of regret and admiration. Regret because they mishandled you. Admiration because your evolution is impossible to deny. And that combination is eating them alive. They're wrestling with questions they never expected to ask themselves. Why did I distance myself from the one person who carried that kind of aura? How did I not see the potential when it was right in front of me? How did I let my insecurity push away someone who was clearly meant for more? These questions echo in their mind every time they see you making progress. Every time they hear your name in a positive conversation. Every time they watch you walk into a room with that unshakable confidence. Every time someone praises you. Every time your presence shifts the atmosphere. They feel a sting in their chest because they know, on some level, they contributed to the very transformation that now intimidates them. They fueled your growth without realizing it, and they can't handle that reality. So now they're switching sides, not in a calculated strategic move, but in a panicked, subconscious retreat from their own guilt. They're trying to rewrite their role in your story. They're attempting to reposition themselves as supporters, as allies, as people who always believed in you. Even though you remember exactly how they reacted when you were at your lowest, they didn't just doubt you, they dismissed you. They didn't just underestimate you, they quietly rooted against you. They didn't just distance themselves, they distanced themselves right when you needed clarity, support, and consistency. And yet here they are, coming back with shaky smiles, softened tones, overly polite messages, cautious energy. Not because you demanded it, not because you confronted them, but because they no longer feel safe standing where they stood before. Your evolution changed the power dynamic completely. Now they're dealing with a version of you they're not equipped for. A version of you who doesn't chase, doesn't cling, doesn't repeat yourself, doesn't seek validation, doesn't need approval, doesn't fear distance. A version of you who learned how to breathe without them. And that scares them more than anything. Because deep down, they always assumed you needed them more than they needed you. Now they're realizing how backwards that belief actually was. You were the anchor. You were the grounding force. You were the stable presence. You were the one who brought sincerity, depth, and emotional intelligence into the connection. And without you, they feel the instability they once projected onto you. They feel the emptiness they once accused you of having. They feel the confusion they once believed you created. They're waking up to the reality that it wasn't you, it was them. And that realization is brutal. Their ego wasn't ready to face someone who could evolve this fast. Their pride wasn't prepared to watch you glow in ways they never imagined. Their insecurity wasn't designed to handle your transformation. And now they're scrambling, trying to figure out how to re-enter your life without looking desperate, without sounding insincere, without admitting how deeply they regret underestimating you. But no matter how they rehearse the apology, no matter how they plan the conversation, no matter how they try to present themselves as self-reflective and mature, their energy exposes them. You can feel the guilt radiating off them. You can sense the shift in their behavior. You can tell they're trying to get close again. It's written in their body language. It's hidden in the pauses between their words. It's embedded in the hesitations before they speak. It's evident in the way they watch you now, carefully, respectfully, almost nervously. They're afraid of two things: losing access to you forever, and facing the truth of why they mistreated you in the first place. They thought you'd come crawling back. You didn't. They thought you'd shrink after they left. You expanded. They thought they held the upper hand. They never did. And now they're living through the consequences of their assumptions. They're witnessing the shift they never expected. People around them are questioning their previous behavior. People around them are noticing how your energy has strengthened while theirs has weakened. People are asking them, what happened between you two? And they have no respectable answer. Because they know if they tell the truth, they'll expose their insecurity, their immaturity, their lack of emotional depth. So instead they sit quietly with their guilt while pretending to be indifferent. But their energy betrays them every time they see you. That tension in their shoulders, that stiffness in their expression, that awkwardness in their presence. They're terrified you can see through them, and the truth is, you can. You see everything more clearly now. You see the way they shift their weight when they're near you. You see the way their eyes soften, the way their voice changes, the way their energy becomes calmer, almost apologetic. You see their hesitation when they try to speak. You see the microseconds of contemplation before they say your name. You see the emotional conflict happening internally. They want to apologize, but they're struggling with the order of operations. Should they explain first, or admit first, or soften the blow first, or test your openness first? They're running a mental simulation every time they plan to approach you. And that simulation always ends with the same conclusion: I can't avoid this forever. I have to face them. But they don't know how to face someone who has grown this much. They don't know how to approach someone who no longer lives in the emotional space they once created. They don't know how to speak to someone who has stepped into their power, their identity, their worth, and their clarity. They feel small around you now. Not because you make them feel small, but because your presence has become too honest for their past behavior to survive. They can't hide behind excuses anymore. They can't disguise their motives anymore. They can't pretend their choices were harmless. They know you felt everything they thought you didn't feel. They know you saw everything they thought you didn't see. They know you understood everything they thought you were too naive to understand. And that's why they're switching sides. Because being against you now feels unsafe. Because staying distant now feels humiliating. Because ignoring you now feels impossible. They're not trying to reconnect with the old version of you. They're trying to earn permission to stand near the new version of you. And here's the most ironic part. They're not fighting to apologize so you'll forgive them. They're fighting to apologize so they can forgive themselves. Because your transformation is the mirror they've been avoiding. Your growth reflects everything they suppressed. Your confidence exposes everything they hid. Your resilience reveals everything they lacked. You are the reminder of what they could have become if they had chosen courage instead of insecurity, effort instead of ego, honesty instead of manipulation. And that's why they're fighting over who gets to apologize first. Not because they suddenly became kind-hearted or self-aware, but because they can't carry the weight of their own conscience anymore. They're exhausted from pretending. They're tired of acting indifferent. They're drained from resisting the truth. Your energy has become too loud for them to ignore. And now, as they inch their way back toward you, trying to gauge your reaction, trying to judge the gates of your emotional boundaries, trying to see if you're open or closed, something even more fascinating is happening beneath the surface, a shift that will shape the next stage of this entire story. Because while they're analyzing you, reading your posture, studying your silence, overthinking every facial expression you make, you're watching them with a clarity they never expected you to have. You're not defensive, you're not guarded, you're not hostile, you're just observant, and that observant energy is what's tearing their ego apart. Because when someone has truly evolved, their presence doesn't fight, it reveals. And being revealed is the one thing they never prepared themselves for. They were ready for you to snap, ready for you to call them out, ready for you to list every mistake, every betrayal, every moment they made you doubt yourself. They rehearsed their counter-arguments. They prepared their justifications. They created backup explanations in case you confronted them. But you didn't. You didn't confront them. You didn't demand accountability. You didn't list offenses. You didn't bring up the past with that heavy emotional tone they expected from you. Instead, you stood there with that calm energy that says, I've outgrown the old version of me, and I've outgrown the old version of you, too. And that is exactly what terrifies them. Because now they realize they're not approaching the person they mistreated. You're a completely different force now. Your self-control unnerves them. Your emotional stability throws them off. Your distance isn't cold, it's dignified. Your boundaries aren't harsh, they're clear. And that clarity makes them feel exposed. Because for the first time, they're seeing the truth without filters, without their ego protecting them, without their excuses comforting them. You didn't become petty, you became powerful. You didn't become angry, you became aware. And nothing scares guilty people more than someone who evolved without needing them. So now they're stuck in this strange internal tug-of-war. One part of them wants to rush toward you with a dramatic apology. Another part wants to stay back and pretend nothing happened. Another part wants to rebuild the connection slowly. Another part wants to act like they never left. They don't know which version of themselves is safe to bring to you. Their mind is spinning with possibilities. Their pride is weakening. Their excuses are collapsing. Their heart is restless. Because they know they can't undo what they did. They can't erase the energy they brought. They can't rewrite the choices they made. They can only face the consequences of who they were. And that terrifies them. What's even more fascinating is that they're not just switching sides emotionally. They're switching alliances socially, too. People who once laughed at you are now defending you. People who once doubted you are now praising you. People who once dismissed you are now speaking highly of you. And the ones who hurt you the most are watching these social dynamics change, watching opinions shift, watching conversations evolve. They're realizing you didn't just grow privately, you grew publicly. And that public shift is what's making them sweat. Because now they're not just apologizing to you, they're apologizing to their own reputation. Their pride can't handle being the only ones who got it wrong. Their ego can't survive being seen as the person who underestimated the one everyone else is now admiring. This is why they're suddenly trying to get close again. This is why they're suddenly looking for ways to initiate small talk. This is why they're carefully observing your mood before they speak. This is why their voice softens when they address you. This is why they become overly polite in conversations. They're trying to figure out one thing: how much do you know? Not about what they did, but about how deeply they regret it. Because regret leaks through energy, and their energy has been leaking non-stop. They're terrified you can feel their guilt, terrified you can sense their embarrassment, terrified you can see the inner conflict they're trying to hide behind neutral expressions. They're terrified of being transparent around you now. Because transparency means vulnerability. Vulnerability means truth. And truth means they have to face who they actually were toward you, not who they pretended to be. And while all of this is happening, something even more unexpected is unfolding behind the scenes. They're competing with each other. The same people who once united against you, bonded over their assumptions about you, laughed at your expense, or silently rooted against you. Those same people are now competing for your forgiveness, competing for your attention, competing for your approval, competing for the privilege of being let back into your world. They don't admit it out loud, but they feel it. They feel the rivalry. They feel the urgency. They feel the pressure to act before someone else beats them to the apology. Because now, apologizing to you isn't just about clearing their conscience. It's about securing a connection that they suddenly realize was always valuable. You've become the person whose presence is rare, whose energy is grounding, whose growth is undeniable. And in their mind, losing you permanently feels like losing access to a version of themselves they always wanted to be, but never had the courage to cultivate. You represent something they lack, something they admire, something they secretly wished they could emulate. And now that you've detached, now that you've flourished, now that you've redefined yourself without them, they feel the heaviness of their own stagnation. You're not chasing them anymore, and that forces them to chase themselves, to confront themselves, to question themselves. They're seeing aspects of their personality they never wanted to acknowledge. They're recognizing patterns they always denied. They're feeling the consequences of their own emotional immaturity. You were the mirror that made them uncomfortable, and now that same mirror makes them want to fix what they broke. Not because they deserve a place in your life, but because they can't stand who they were when they mistreated you. And as the days go by, the tension inside them grows. They replay old conversations. They rethink their decisions. They remember moments where they dismissed your kindness, ignored your intuition, misread your intentions. They're haunted by the clarity of hindsight, haunted by the thought that they pushed away the very person who respected them genuinely, and haunted by the realization that you didn't need to punish them. You let life do that work for you. They can feel the distance now, not the physical one, the energetic one. That distance isn't angry, it isn't bitter, it isn't closed off. It's simply evolved. It's the distance of someone who no longer operates from insecurity, someone who doesn't beg for connection, someone who recognizes their worth, someone who doesn't bend for people who weren't willing to stand next to them. And that distance is the final blow to their ego. Because your detachment isn't rejection, it's liberation. And the moment they felt that liberation is the moment they realized something terrifying. Because now, as they hover on the edge of approaching you, their hesitation thickens, their indecision sharpens, their nerves taut like a wire about to snap. They're debating not only how to speak, but if they even deserve to. And in that hesitation lies the most powerful leverage of all, the silent authority of your energy. You don't need to speak to assert dominance. You don't need to explain, justify, or demand. Your mere presence, fully anchored in self-awareness, shifts the balance, makes them question everything they once took for granted, and forces them to confront the consequences of their miscalculations. And those consequences are terrifying to them, because every interaction they now attempt feels like walking on a floor that could collapse beneath them at any moment. Every word they rehearse, every gesture they plan, every attempt to seem sincere feels fragile, transparent, and inadequate. They are acutely aware that you've evolved far beyond the rules they once used to manipulate or predict you. And that awareness fills them with a mix of awe, guilt, and primal fear. They are scrambling to regain footing, and yet they can't, because the energy you radiate is both unshakable and unpredictable. They expected weakness, they expected neediness, they expected the old patterns, the familiar rhythm of someone who tolerated their indecision, their ego, their arrogance. But none of that exists anymore. You've become a force they cannot bargain with, cannot control, cannot predict. And that is why they're switching sides, not out of respect, not purely out of regret, but because your energy exposed their limitations, and they are terrified of being left behind, irrelevant, or worse, seen for the shallow versions of themselves they allowed to exist. And the fight begins. Not a fight of words or aggression, but a subtle, almost invisible competition to be the first to reach you, to earn that first opportunity to reconcile, to make amends. One by one, they measure their own guilt against the others, comparing who wronged you the most, who hesitated the longest, who missed the clearest signals. They jockey for position in a way that is almost ridiculous to observe, and yet it is terrifyingly effective because it's powered by their conscience, by the part of them that finally refuses to ignore the truth. They can't pretend any longer. They can't delay. They can't spin excuses that even they believe. And all of it centers on you, not because you demanded it, not because you created leverage, but because your presence, your evolution, and your energy forced a reckoning. The energy that once intimidated them quietly, persistently, now dominates the room without effort. They feel it in the weight of your gaze, in the calm certainty of your movements, in the unspoken confidence that suggests you've anticipated all of their inner turmoil. They realize that apologizing isn't enough, not because you need it, but because they need it, to reconcile their own sense of integrity with the reality they previously refused to acknowledge. And as they move closer, fumbling through their words, attempting to calibrate every syllable, every intonation, they discover something even more powerful. You're still the observer. You're still measuring their sincerity, their readiness, their awareness. You've allowed the door to be open, but you hold the key to how fully they can step through it. And that knowledge, the subtle yet absolute control it implies, is a force more terrifying than anger, more disarming than confrontation. They're switching sides, and they're doing it in real time, in front of you. And with every gesture, every tone, every hesitation, they are proving how deeply your growth unsettled them. They're aware now that this isn't just a personal evolution, it's a social recalibration. The people around them notice the dynamic, the energy, the subtle shift in authority, the way their eyes track you differently. They notice the quiet reverence, the caution, the careful measuring of words and movements. And in that observation, your influence spreads. Your energy doesn't just intimidate, it forces reflection, introspection, self-analysis. You're not creating fear by threat, You're creating fear by inevitability, the inevitability that they must confront their own inadequacies, their own poor judgment, their own underestimation of your presence. And as they compete, jockeying for the first opportunity to speak, to apologize, to redeem themselves, they reveal more than they intend. They reveal the truth of their past misjudgments. They reveal the depth of their fear, the fragility of their ego, the extent of their envy, and the urgency of their need for approval, not from you, but from the part of themselves that recognizes they missed the mark. And while they scramble, while they measure each other, while they debate the order in which to approach, the thing they cannot escape is the reality that none of this is about manipulating you. You cannot be manipulated anymore. Your energy, your presence, your growth, these things are beyond their control. And the realization strikes them like a blow. For all their planning, for all their strategizing, for all their pride, you are the uncontested authority in this dynamic now. You've observed quietly, patiently, strategically. You've allowed space for them to reveal themselves. And as they reveal themselves, scrambling for redemption, apologizing, overcompensating, competing, they're showing you everything you needed to see. Not just that they understand your value now, but that they recognize the consequences of underestimating it. That recognition, the raw, undeniable truth, is intoxicating and disarming. It demonstrates the power of silent dominance, of energy that doesn't need to assert itself loudly, that doesn't need to threaten, that simply exists fully, immovably, unmistakably. And now comes the final act of their internal war. They are lined up, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, each one trying to navigate the correct approach. Who speaks first? Who admits more? Who softens? Who emphasizes their understanding? Who demonstrates insight without overcompensating? They are measuring, calculating, overthinking, agonizing, and all of it is visible, tangible, and impossible to ignore. They're watching each other, aware that if they stumble, someone else will win the privilege of making amends first. That awareness makes them jittery, nervous, almost frantic, yet everything is filtered through the overwhelming respect, fear, and awe your energy commands. And they can't escape it. No strategy can circumvent it. No planning can overcome it. No excuse can reverse it. They are utterly at the mercy of the energy you projected long before they ever realized it existed. They are switching sides, yes, but not in a chaotic or random fashion. They are doing so in a pattern dictated by your presence, your evolution, your clarity. Their apologies, their gestures, their attempts to reclaim access are choreographed not by their egos, but by the unconscious pressure your energy applies. They feel compelled to act not because they are brave, but because they are confronted with the undeniable truth. Standing against you is no longer possible. Standing indifferent is no longer viable. Standing casual is no longer sustainable. Your energy shattered the illusion that they could remain unaffected. And now, every approach, every step, every word they muster is a reflection of that realization. And as all this unfolds, the most astonishing phenomenon occurs. They begin to mirror your energy without even knowing it. Their voices soften, their posture shifts, their tone becomes careful. Their attempts at control dissolve because control is irrelevant in your presence. Their competitiveness becomes a silent acknowledgement of your authority. They are fighting to re-enter your sphere, not because they have mastered it, but because your growth and presence made them realize how desperately they had underestimated the person they once tried to manipulate, dismiss, or ignore. They are humbled, They are disoriented. They are overpowered, not by words, not by confrontation, not by threat, but by the undeniable force of your energy, your calm, your clarity, your power. And that, finally, is why they're switching sides. Not because they planned it, not because they plotted it, not because they calculated it. They are switching sides because your presence demanded it. Your evolution demanded it. Your energy demanded it. Every hesitant step toward you, every overthought gesture, every carefully rehearsed word, it is proof that they cannot resist the gravitational pull of someone who is entirely centered, entirely aware, entirely unshakable. And now, the stage is set. They are competing, they are apologizing, they are acknowledging, they are realizing. And while they battle for your attention, your acceptance, your permission, the reality is, they are witnessing the power they always feared, but never understood. The power you always held, now fully revealed, fully embodied, fully alive.